My dad left me when I was little. I didn't know him, so I had this idea. If I ever come across him, I will get the revenge for what he put me and Mom through. And you guys might not believe this, but I think I found him. My life was a difficult one up until recently. When I was around 6 years old, my dad abandoned me and my mother and never heard from him again. I was too young to understand what was going on, but I definitely understood the ramifications. All of a sudden, my mom and I had to move out of our nice apartment and neighborhood to a new, very bad one. Our neighborhood was dirty, unsafe, with a ton of drug addicts and dealers everywhere. Because of this, I had to go to the nearest public school, which was just as bad. Obviously, this made my childhood a living hell, as I could not connect with anybody and just felt lonely all the time. I was too scared to go out most of the time, and my mom made sure that I would not hang out around the neighborhood so as not to turn out like the people here. Even though my childhood was hard, I barely had friends. It was my teenage years that were really, really bad. When I was a teenager was when I realized that I desperately needed a father. My mom was amazing, but I had this feeling of something missing badly. I was going through so much that I wish I could discuss with an older man. And this led to me looking for father figures everywhere, like my teachers and my football coaches. This led to a wave of depression in my late teens, and it was made worse by my mom getting ill. So I had to take care of her constantly. Because I could not leave my mom, I did not go to college as there was no good schools in our state. I stayed by her side, but I worked for those 3 or 4 years as hard as I could. I wanted to change the way we lived, but I realized there was only so much I could do. I jumped from minimum wage job to minimum wage job, until I finally came across a reputable job at an office building about 4 months ago. I thought this was really it, and I would finally be able to turn our lives around, move out of our neighborhood, and do what I wish my dad had done 20 years ago. Despite this, I still felt this deep resentment towards my father for what he did to us. Every time I talked to my mom about it, she would refuse to comment. Over the years, I kept getting angrier and angrier. I could not believe that a man could just stand up and leave his wife and son and disappear for absolutely no reason. What I did remember of my dad was very little, but I remember that he was kind enough. I don't know what my mom's experience was, but the way she refused to talk about him was clear enough. However, the day before I was supposed to go to work, I sat down with my mom and she finally explained everything to me. She said that right before Dad left, he developed some serious problems due to the lack of money and stable work. She told me that he was starting to change completely and just wanted us to keep downgrading our lives to keep up with his lack of work and ability to provide. She said that he became angry, violent, and took out his anger on her. He swore that he would put me up for adoption and divorce her. But she fought back. All of those problems culminated in him just leaving one day without any notice. I was fueled by rage, and I wished that I could meet him again one day so I can get my revenge for all these years of pain. The first couple of months at work were amazing. I was driven and focused, so I got a lot of work done, and it was rewarding enough. I made enough friends, and it was a very pleasant environment. Lunchtime was my favorite, as I got to hang out with everyone and get to know the different departments. It was an advertising agency, so we had a lot of different people doing different things. 2 months has passed. During lunchtime, I started meeting with this new guy, Rocco. I don't know his real name, but that's what everyone calls him. He worked in another department, but on his first day, I was the first person he saw. So we became friends and met during lunchtime to talk every now and then. Rocco was a good 20 years older than me, in his mid-40s. He always had this weird vibe about him, and I was never really comfortable talking to him for more than 20 minutes at a time. You can tell something was wrong with him or that he's seen some stuff. Still, he was nice enough to socialize with me, and we got to know some basic stuff about each other. I knew that he was divorced and lives alone now. He struggled to find work for a bit until he found this job, which restarted his life basically. All he knew about me was that I did a few minimum wage jobs before coming here. I thought of him as any other coworker, but he always seemed to be the first one I saw at lunch. About a month ago, one day, Rocco and I were by the vending machine. I could see that his eyes were red, so I just thought that he had no sleep. He was unusually cranky that day, so anytime I tried to ask if anything was wrong, he would shut me up. I tried to ask him what was wrong, but he got very aggravated quickly and started a fight. I had no idea what was happening, but he suddenly punched me in the face before people could hold him back. I asked him what the hell was wrong with him, but he seemed like he wasn't even there to respond. I assumed he was drunk or had something going on. Later that day, he got called into our manager's office and got a warning. If he did anything like that again, he would be fired ASAP. The next day, I decided to be the bigger man and went to apologize or see what the problem was. He told me he was just having a rough day and that, quote, life was being harsh to him. I had no idea what that meant, but he soon started to open up. He told me that he does have a wife and 2 stepkids. He met his wife a short while ago and he decided that he should move in with them, and that he would provide for them and keep them safe. However, he realized just how hard that is and told me that he can't handle the responsibility and that he never could. That day, I told him how lack of responsibility led to problems with my dad that I still cannot get over till that day. I did not get into any details, but I hoped that I gotten through to him. But I was mistaken. Suddenly, he started telling me all about his personal life. He told me how years ago he got married to his high school sweetheart, that he then started to loathe and wish they never got married. He went into extreme details about how she did not grow up looking as she did in high school, and that he lost interest in her very fast, with the only thing keeping him around was a kid that they had together. He went even into more details about how he hated his life, wife, and even the kid. He said the kid was dumb and could not understand the basic commands. I was absolutely shocked at the stuff he was saying, and how much I related to it, but on the other side of the coin. I was curious, so I asked him what he did at the end, and he told me he got a divorce from his wife and they both went to their separate ways. I could not help but think of his ex-wife and kid, and how they can be just like me and my mom now. Suddenly, any ounce of respect I had for him was completely gone. I saw him exactly how I saw my father, a heartless loser. I could not communicate this to him, obviously, but I decided that I wasn't going to interact with him anymore, and he just wasn't worth it. The next few days at work were like this, and I barely even took the lunch break. I don't want to face him, so I don't cause a scene and tell him what I think of people like him. I decide to keep my distance from Rocco. I've lost all respect, and I did not want him talking to me, so I kept moving around several times until he finally found me. It seemed like I was the only employee who actually bothered to talk to him, so he kept talking to me non-stop. I kept trying to make excuses, but he just couldn't leave. I thought if he had to talk, then I would get some more information out of him. So I asked him again about his family, and he told me this crazy drama between him and his ex-wife. I asked him what was so wrong about her, and it seemed like he just lost interest and wanted to, quote, feel free. He told me marriage was so restrictive and he felt like he was stuck in a cage. And it was even worse because there was a kid. I tried to reason with him, but it did not work. It really did seem like he was just a horrible person. Before the party ended, the company took a group picture of all of us. As we were leaving, Rocco offered that we go eat something, but I instantly told him no and that I had to head home quickly. I was really hoping that he would not think of us as friends, just because we knew some basic details about each other now. I've left Mom all day, so I needed to get back quickly to see what she was up to. I got home and spent some time with her. Someone sent the group pic we all took at the office group, so I showed it to my mom. As soon as she looked at the picture, her face went white as a ghost. She could barely speak. I asked her what was wrong. She pointed at Rocco, started crying. A part of me suspected that she was about to say this, but it still hurt me when she did. Rocco was my father. She broke down and I kept explaining to her that I had no idea. I did not want to tell her about all the horrible things Rocco said about her and me, so she would feel worse. That night, my anger was refueled to crazy degrees, and I was committed to destroy Rocco. All that pain of my childhood and teenage years were flowing through me, and I knew that he had to be a horrible ending. Just not because he left us, but for the ridiculous reasons that he did. I could not sleep all night thinking of a plan. I knew that I would get him fired, but it wasn't enough. I needed him to feel that sense of loneliness and isolation that Mom and I felt for 2 decades. I thought about beating him up, or even killing him. But it would not be satisfying. He needed to suffer way worse and for longer. Killing him would just be too quick and I would get in trouble. I sat down and laid out my entire plan, and it would all start the next day. I knew that Rocco, or should I say, Dad, had extreme anger issues and was very quick-tempered, so I played on that. He had already gotten a warning once the time he got angry and punched me, so he was very close to going out the door. What made everything very convenient was that he was a big sports and football nut, and anything anyone said about his favorite team was a red line. So when he was in the bathroom, I planted a ripped football jersey painted "This team sucks" on the back and left it at his desk. As soon as he saw it, he started throwing a fit and shouting. He demanded that he knows who put this there until his voice reached management and HR upstairs. I went up to him, acting as if I was trying to calm him down, but it was working. He kept getting angrier and angrier until all of a sudden, as soon as I put my hand on his shoulder to calm down, he punched me in the face. Again. I did not like getting punched, but it was better to be me than someone else. Management came down immediately, saw that what was happening, and fired him on the spot. I held my jaw in pain, but I was really just hiding the fact that I was smiling ear to ear. On this way out of the office, he kept cursing the whole company. This was just the first step. Now, I needed to make sure that he could not get any other job. The second step was having him lose his second family, whom I bet he did not care about, just like he did not care about us. Rocco has these drinking problems, and he definitely had cheating tendencies. I talked to a friend of mine to go and just try to flirt with him a little bit while recording the whole thing to see what his reaction would be, and then tell him that she needs to leave. The goal was just to prove that he'd be willing to cheat on his wife so I can send this to his wife. But things got way worse, or way better than I expected. My friend agreed to go and flirt with him in the cafe that he frequents. She had one of those tiny button cameras and was sitting way in the back out of sight to see what happens. She went up to him as he was drinking heavily and started making her moves. It seemed like he wasn't interested at first, probably because he had just lost his job, but she quickly got his attention. She talked to him for a few minutes and then I called her, so she could pretend that she was picking up an important phone call and said that she had to leave. He suddenly grabbed her arm and told her she can't leave, and I was about to leave my seat. But she yanked her arm away, told him to leave her alone, and went outside. He got up and followed her out, and I was dead worried. I made my way through the back door so he would not see behind him. My friend was leaving through this alleyway when he suddenly grabbed her and tried to force himself on her. He was in no state of mind, and she started screaming. I ran to the alley to get her, but a couple other guys got there first to beat the living crap out of him. I watched as they kicked him down, broke his nose, and one of them gave him a massive kick in the crotch for what he was about to do. I instantly called the police, and the police came and took him away. My friend was absolutely terrified, so I drove her home and apologized at least 1,000,000 times, telling her that I had no idea he would do something like that. It took a whole while until she finally felt safe enough to sleep, and for me to leave. I had exactly what I needed though, and even more. My dad was doing time in the police station, and my friend decided to press charges to put against him in prison. First, I went over to his house and saw his wife and 2 stepkids there. It felt bad doing this to them, but I needed it done. I told her what's happened and showed her the button cam video. She was obviously horrified and broke down crying. She told her kids to pack their stuff, and just as they were about to leave, her phone rang. It was my dad. Since anyone locked up gets any one phone call, he decided to call his wife. She picked up and just kept hearing him talk without replying. She told him to go to hell and was about to hang up, but I grabbed the phone and started talking to him. He did not know who I was, but I just told him that what goes around comes around and that's what he deserves. As I was on the phone, Dad's wife and stepkids have packed their bags and decide to leave. I asked where they're going, but she told me that she never wanted to see him again. I made sure that he heard all that on the phone, and then I told him that he's going to be alone for the rest of his life. He kept asking me who I was and why I was doing this, and all I said was that I was an old friend. My friend did press charges and the case went to court. I was there every step of the way, and it felt amazing when the judge slammed that hammer down, giving him 4 years in prison. That day, I went back home to Mom and told her the whole shebang. She cried tears of joy and thanked God that she finally got her revenge for all the stuff he did to her. I hadn't seen her this happy in years. But one thread still remained. He still needed to know who did this to him. About a month after, I visited my dad in prison. He was confused when he saw me, but assumed that I was being a friend and going to visit him to check up on him. He sat down, smiled, and told me that he's happy to see an old face. I told him we were no longer friends, and told him that I was his son, and that I did all this to him. His face went white. He was clearly trying to process this information of anger and hate. I smiled, told him that he put us through hell all these years, and that now he needed to go through this hell too. I told him that he deserved every bit of pain he'll receive in this prison wall, and that I'll come visit just to gloat every other month and tell him how amazing life is outside the slammer. Upon hearing all that, I actually saw him shed a tear. I told him it's too late for tears, and that if he gets out, or when he gets out, I'll make sure he doesn't get a moment of happiness. I told him that after 4 years, he still owes me 16 years of pain to make up for the 20. I left him there alone and miserable. I don't know how true this story is, but if it's true, this was some of the most diabolical nuclear revenge I've ever read. I'm not gonna lie though, it sounds like Rocco deserves every single thing that he's got coming. Let me know what you guys think. Drop your thoughts in the comment section down below, or let me know if you have similar situations. Our final story on the day is an aunt story. My aunt's taken me to court after my mom's suicide and has accused me of killing my mother. Trigger warning, the next story does include suicide. Let's get right into it. A few months ago, my mother killed herself. I'm a 22-year-old male and her only son. My parents are divorced and I had not seen my mother for a long time, due to the fact that I was living in Asia teaching English. I promised my mother that I would visit her when I returned home. She recently moved to a different state from my father. But about a half month before I came home, my grandfathers on my dad's side became very ill and would not live much longer. My mother told me I should visit my father first because of this. I should also add that at this time, the past few years, I was very, very depressed and had some mental and physical health problems that would not improve. I really wanted to be at my home where I felt comfortable, my dad's house, and recover for some time. When I got home, my grandfather passed away on the day I arrived, and I was not feeling well enough to travel at all, so I stayed with my father for a few weeks. Later, my mother told me she would visit her parents in another state in a few weeks. I debated visiting her at the time, but I wasn't sure I would be feeling well enough to travel again. My grandmother, on my mother's side, called me and asked me to come home at this time, but I told her I would have to think about it if I can come. Eventually, I decided I would visit them at the same time as my mom. The night I arrived at my grandparents' house was one night before my mother and aunt would arrive. That night, my aunt called us and told us that my mother had just killed herself, and that they found the body in her apartment in the afternoon. I was driving home from the airport at the time. I remember that night so vividly as I could not sleep and was crying so hard my body ached. My aunt arrived a few days later, and we stayed together for some time. I noticed my grandmother's behavior was quite unusual at this time, and my mother had mentioned previously that she was beginning to show some dementia symptoms, but both my aunt and grandmother were not hostile to me at this time. They seemed like they wanted to stick together and get through this as a family. After about a week, I returned to my father's home and stayed there. I was an emotional mess for the following month. I had a trouble remembering simple things and felt exhausted all the time. Eventually, I began to feel better and start to move things forward with my mother's probate and planning my own life. When my grandmother and aunt called me to tell me that, quote, "This is my fault," and, quote, "You killed your mother," I was absolutely shocked to hear them say this. They accused me of not calling her enough, not wanting to visit her, only caring about her money, even though she was a teacher with a small condo and was not wealthy. They even insulted my father. Relatives from my father's side called me to help me through this, but I've not spoken to my aunt or grandmother since the incident. I know both my grandmother and aunt feel immense guilt for my mother's death, especially my aunt since it was her who suggested my mother come to live near her, and my mother hated living in that area. Today, I received an email from my aunt that told me I would have to go to court. It simply stated that I should call this lawyer. I'm so hurt that this is how they decided to handle a tragedy like this. It's so difficult for me to think clearly, and I can't believe this is how they chose to behave. Any advice would be appreciated. I feel like I missed a lot of details, so feel free to ask me questions if need be. This must have been such a horrible time for OP, and it was hard for me to get through this emotional story. I do want to read a comment that OP replied to. If your aunt's taking you to court, please don't call the lawyer she suggested. Don't respond to the email, don't talk to her. She's not on your side. Consult with your father and father's side of the family. I'm not sure what they could take you to court for. OP replies this. Thank you. I really wanted to talk to her, but I will ignore it and talk to my probate lawyer and father. Okay guys, you heard it yourself. Let me know what you think of this story. As always, drop it down in the comment section. That's all the content I have for you today. If you're new to the channel, fancy a subscribe as we do this kind of thing every single day. I hope to see you guys tomorrow. Have a wonderful one.